What's up, guys? What is up? Welcome back to Deck Talk Podcast. Boy, we've got a episode for you today, and I've been excited about this episode. I mean, ever since Norman and I started talking about doing a podcast, this guy has been the number one person that I've been wanting to get on here because he's been so helpful for me and learning and stuff. But let's get going. My name is Colin Burnett.
And I'm Norman Lee. This episode is brought to you by Bruiser Baits. Fish the best, baits made. Right here in the USA. Our guest tonight, well, let's just say he is a smack down hammer in southeast Tennessee, the owner of Bassquest Fishing Charters. He is one of, if not the best, lake mapper and grapher in the industry. He is Mr. Caleb Bell. What's going
What's
on?
up, guys?
What's up, brother? What is up, man? I am so glad to have you on here, brother.
Yes,
So,
sir.
Man, let's do this. What it? I know, guys are sorry that we got a little late jump, but
Just got off the water.
he just got off the water. I mean, he come in pulling in. That boat was kicked sideways.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but uh, but how was your day today out on the water, Caleb?
It was good. I just had a half day trip. Had an ortho appointment this morning, and we caught them really good. I fired up a couple schools, and we ended up probably knocking on the door. I hadn't done the math yet. Probably 27, 28 pounds.
Man,
About 3 hours there. Ain't too bad.
man.
AKA the hammer.
Hey Norman, I'll tell you this before we really get started going into this. Every time I've been on the boat or Caleb's been in the boat with me, I've had double digit fish.
Yeah,
All
just
right.
been the wrong ones.
The wrong brand, right?
Yeah, it's the
You
wrong
gotta be
place.
specific. Say I want a 10-pounder. You got to be like bass.
You
Not
know,
a
it's funny. Yeah, Colin has a knack for saying it's a cat. It's a big cat. It's a huge cat. Man, when me and Colin fish together, almost every trip, we catch 1, 2, or 3 huge drums. And
Yeah.
every time we get a big drum on, Colin's like, I think it's a big cat. I think it's a big cat. Well, I think it was, what was it, our last trip or the trip before last, Colin finally got his wish. And we pretty much figured, one of these times he's going to be correct. And we ended up catching a huge cat. So he was correct after about what?
I don't know, about 50 trips.
We've been catching so many big catfish lately. So a lot of those cats
Yeah.
are getting post-spawn and pushing out on the ledges where I'm catching these bass. And they're mixing in with the big bass, unfortunately. So we're catching like 20 to 30 pounders. We had one client the other day caught one that bottomed out my 50-pound scale. Like,
Oh, wow.
I don't even know how big it was.
Wow.
Man, I've never caught one that big yet.
No.
It's nuts out there right now. There's so many big ones. It's like you're trying to kind of gauge because the really big bass, they're in little pods, like little wolf packs, between 3 and 7 usually of those, the over 6 pounders that I'm looking for, and they mix right in with the daggum catfish. They'll be like right in the middle of the catfish. They're not really with the bass school. They're kind of out to the side, and they're always cruising. So I'm trying to hit them when they cruise out of those catfish, so I'm not getting jumped on by a whisker critter there.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So Caleb, how did you get started into fishing?
So I've been fishing since I was in diapers. I mean, so my great grandparents, they had a lake house above Sail Creek there, and my grandfather would take me down there any chance that we could get to go out there. I'm talking dead of winter, didn't matter. Especially wintertime was our best time because we could walk the banks and go up and down. And we got a fishing boat when I was probably 7, 8 years old, and then we kind of upgraded to another fishing boat. So any chance I could get, you couldn't get me off the water. I mean, little bitty Walmart shoes, waited out in the dead of winter, freezing to death, and I'd fish until past dark if they'd let me.
You know what? You're known by, everybody up in this area is the man that has caught a lot of double digits up and
Yes.
around here. What's your earliest memory, or how young were you on your earliest memory of your first double digit fish?
So I didn't catch a double-digit fish until I was, gosh, how old was I? I was in my early 20s when I caught my
Right.
first double-digit.
Yeah.
and it was so funny. So I went years and years. I think I was probably 18, 19 years old before I caught one over 8. But I tell people that all the time. A lot of times they'll struggle. You're doing the same thing over and over. You're catching a lot of solid fish, but you're not catching the right one. Once you finally catch that big fish, it's like a domino effect. It'll just keep happening over and over
Yeah,
again. And as you
yeah,
catch more and more of them, you start to know what to look for and get more confident. Leaving the fish to get on the right kind of fish. And so since
yeah,
then, I think I've got 6 or 7 double digits I've caught on artificial on this lake. I can't even tell you how many I've caught on live bait. I mean,
yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
silly.
And I Norman, if you haven't checked out the video, what is about 4 or 5 years ago, Caleb,
Yeah,
that
3 years ago.
he had uh, what over 50 pounds and five.
No, it
And
was
then
that video. I think it was like 46 pounds. I've had a couple of like solo bags live bait fishing, like knocking on 27, a little over 20, or sorry, 47, and just almost 48. But the biggest 5 fish limit that's ever been in the boat on the live bait happened in March this year. I had some guys come in from, I think they were from Alabama, and had 50.22 and 5.
That's awesome, man. That's
man,
awesome. Yeah, Colin was telling me about that. I guess it was what were you saying? It was a 5 for 50 or something like that, Colin. I have
yeah, I
not
mean
watched that video,
it
but I will be going on there to check that out. But yeah, you did tell me about that.
Yeah,
That's
they
that's
dumped.
awesome,
That
man.
all happened in about 10 minutes on one tree. And they
And what?
dumped three
Yeah,
other ones that were easy double digits. We actually had 50.22 with an 8 pounder in that limit.
yeah. And now was that with a guide trip or was it just fun fishing?
It was guide trip.
Okay,
It was a
that's
guide trip.
cool,
Yeah, it was
dude.
just this past March.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So Caleb, Jamie Jones says, "What's up, Caleb?"
Yeah, what's up, dude?
Yeah,
And
Jamie.
let's see, Nate Martin says, "Hey guys." So what's up, Nate?
Mr. Nate Martin, the
So
bullet man. I see him zipping around the lake. I'm
yeah.
not a very fast driver. My max speed is about 45. I get in your $200,000 bass boat, and I'll still drive 45 everywhere.
Yeah, I've toned it down a lot over the years. When I was a young, I was catching bass and burning gas. But as I got older,
Yeah,
I learned that you can't catch a bass at 80 miles an hour. So
no,
the only time my boat sees 70 plus is when I'm in a tournament trying to get from point A to point B. And usually,
exactly.
even after that, after the blast off, I'm usually toning it down a little bit. But I remember back in my young days, dude, it was pedal to the floor, wide open, no matter where I was, no matter when it
Letting
was.
that two-stroke eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
And the thing about it is everybody knows when here comes a Mercury coming up the. Yeah.
Jet engine. Got
Yeah,
about a 300-foot rooster tail behind it.
oh
Right.
yeah,
Got her peeled back,
yeah.
Yep.
trying to get to Saudi Hump before everybody else.
Right. Exactly. So, hey Caleb, let's talk a little bit
Yep.
about this past year of what kind of has gone on, and which I know people that is here locally knows kind
Yeah.
of what you've been through. But I mean, we've had people from like Puerto Rico, we've had people from Ireland and
Yeah.
Spain and stuff that has tuned in that might not
Exactly.
know you. And I mean, and all over the United States. Like last week, we
Yeah.
had over 1,200 viewers watching last week during the live.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that may not know who Caleb Bell is, and we want people to know. And but we also kind of want to kind of give them a little bit of story of kind of. Uh, it's going to lead up into my next question that I'm going to ask. But what has happened in the
First.
past year? I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost. I mean, it's been just
It's
right at
been,
the
yeah.
year.
Yeah, it's been, we passed the anniversary. We did a blood drive over at Talking Tackle the other day. But yeah, so last year, July 1st, I fell off a roof, 20 foot straight onto concrete, and just started a recovery journey from there. Broke my right femur, kind of fractured both knees, tore both knees up really bad, like ligaments and tendons and stuff. And then I shattered my elbow would be the most apt way to say it. I mean, I had like 12 fractures on that elbow. They actually had to take the elbow out. We have a picture on my chart where they took my entire elbow out, put it together with a bunch of screws and stuff, put it back in my arm, and then tacked everything back together. So
Man.
it's amazing that I can still even do anything with that left arm.
Yeah, I know
But
because when it hadn't been. I mean, it was a while after the accident, but
yeah,
it was one of the first times that you had gotten back out on the water. You had hopped in the boat with me,
yeah,
and you're like, man, I had to switch rods from my right hand to the left hand,
yeah, dude,
and
relearning stuff. I'm telling you.
I mean, and Norman, I mean, really, he could not. I mean, if he wanted to straighten that arm out, it was
No,
not.
no, I was like
It
this.
wasn't happening. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it took a long time. It was several months before I could actually. I have a really good PT that like came did house visits with us, and Monica Patel, and she did things like what their expectations were. You know, at Erlanger on where I was going to be. I've absolutely shattered them, and
yeah,
it's not because of me. It's mostly because of like my wife and
yeah,
Monica.
she was all about it. I mean, you can tell just by her
Yeah,
posts and stuff that I mean, she wasn't going to
no,
let you
she's on it.
slack
She
on
doesn't. She
anything.
doesn't play around.
No, she did not.
Yeah.
She cracked that whip on him and
Yeah, I
and
got me a Southern mama in there. She's a strong, independent woman. You don't want to mess with her.
no. So, but how long was it? Because I know it took a while
Yeah,
for you to be able to even get up and start walking around and
it
stuff.
was. I mean, my wife would know better because she's good with remembering stuff like that. But I want to say it was going on like 3 months before I could really do much of anything. I know it was several weeks before I could actually get out of the wheelchair and walk around. And mainly that was due to not the femur, you know, it was the knees, and I had some like big open wounds. I had like a huge gaping wound in one of my knees,
Oh, wow.
and it just I couldn't stand up. Of course, you get muscle atrophy pretty quick, not being able to get around and stuff. So it just kind of lengthened the whole recovery process, and then I ended up having to the leg never did heal, which was funny. They thought the elbow was going to take forever to heal, and it healed ultra fast,
Right.
like way ahead of their expectations. And my leg, which is supposed to be like femur, well, they put a nail in it, is what they call it. It's a big metal
Right.
rod that they beat into your leg with a dang mini sledgehammer. And so they put that in there, and usually that heals up pretty fast. So like 97% of people, it like super easy to recover from. Boom, you're healed, done. Like 3% is what's called a non-union fracture. So people with their bones, when they grow together, they either grow together as one, like this side and this side, or you'll have one side that'll grow to the other side. Non-union means neither one of them decided to do anything. So
Wow.
my leg was still broken come January, and they actually took that rod out and put another rod in, which I recovered from that a lot faster because I didn't have my knees, were recovering to the point where they weren't so swollen I couldn't get up and move around.
Wow.
And just had an ortho appointment today, and they said that it's like looking good, like the healing's looking really good. It's not 100% there or anything, but I don't have another appointment until January, which is the
Oh, that's
anniversary of when
awesome.
I had that second nail put in.
Yeah.
It's been an adventure, that's for sure. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think I've got just about as much as I'm going to get out of the arm and the leg.
Yeah.
And it's, still, there's things I wish I could do that I'm not going to be able to do anymore.
Yeah.
But overall, I'd say it was a good thing. So
And it's kind of it's kind of amazing too. A year removed from when it actually happened. I mean,
yeah,
if you were to see you in public,
yeah,
I mean, you can't even tell anything's ever happened. And man, you have been through a tussle.
yeah.
Yeah.
I put on
You're
a strong front, that's for dang sure.
yeah.
I've always been pretty tough and have a high pain tolerance, so I can,
Man.
that's what the doctors and my PT were just like freaking out when they realized my bone was still broken because I was doing like PT stuff that they were like, "There's no way you should even be able to do that." And I'm like, "Well, you said to do it, so I just did it." I
Yeah.
just grit my teeth and go on.
Yeah, man.
So when all this happened, um, because you just recently, within what the last 4 or 5 months started Bassquest Fishing Charters, right?
So it was. I actually started Bassquest Fishing Charters. It's been 9 or 10 months now
Yeah. Oh, it's been that
that
long.
it's been running. Yeah. So I didn't really start doing trips until I guess it was. Yeah, because I started doing my first trips in like November sometime
Yeah.
when we first started. Or actually, it's the first part of December. That was my first trips
Yeah.
because I had to get all my captain's license stuff and all that taken
Right.
care of. But since then, we've hit the deck of the boat with I want to say like 21 double digits, and there's been another like almost 40 fish that are between nine. Hey, strong independent woman.
Hey, there you are.
I'm bringing you dinner.
Hey, let's see. Oh man, that's good.
It's a Southwest offer.
Ooh, sounds
Oh
good.
man, where's ours?
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you. I'll write you the review for sure. So,
Hello.
I can't
Yeah.
remember what I was saying. All right, so yeah, so we've got
You said
almost
over
40,
20
20,
double digits.
21 or so double digits, and then like another almost 40 fish that were between 9 and 10 pounds, and then another like I don't even know, probably 100 fish that were between like 7 and 9 pounds.
Yeah. So how did you make that decision to go to be able to fish full time, man?
Yeah, so it's something that's always been in the back of my mind. You know, since I started my YouTube channel about 6 years ago, after I started doing a lot of my videos and stuff, and people saw me catching a bunch of fish and big fish, especially, I had all these requests constantly come in. You should guide. Can you guide? Can you take me on a trip? Blah blah blah. And you know, at the time, I would say no, I can't because I don't have a captain's license. And it was something I was always planning on doing, but circumstances due to the accident, it kind of pushed up my timetable. So I was like basically starting over anyway. And I thought, man, this would be the
Yeah.
perfect time to try to jump into that. And it's
Yeah.
been great so far. I mean, I've had
And
tremendous support.
you pretty much got a full schedule. I mean, because what we
Yeah,
talked, a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, we need to, because we got a project that we're wanting to do together,
yeah,
and you're like, man, I just look at my schedule, just set it up, and tell me
yeah,
what
exactly.
days.
That's what I tell everybody now. I'm
Yeah,
just like, literally, like, look on there, give me the day that works for you, and I'll try to block it off. Because if it doesn't get blocked off, it gets booked.
yeah. Now, can you tell people how they can get a hold of you
Yeah,
to be able to book a trip?
yeah, so the easiest way to book my wife, lovely wife, she set up my website. I've got everything automated. So you can go to bassquestfishingcharters.com and that you can book a trip through there. You can see a bunch of pictures. You can see several types of trips that I have, whether it's artificial, big live bait, 4 hour trip, 8 hour trip. And you can book it right there and it'll save the date for both of us and go on from that point. So that's the best way. And you can always look me up on all my socials too. You know, I've Bass Quest Fishing Charters on Instagram and Facebook. I'm always posting pictures of pigs on there. So you can go over there and drool over that and then hit me up and we'll go fish.
Yeah,
And before you get too far, too, you know, you'd mentioned your YouTube channel,
Yeah.
guys. I will tell you, go to Caleb's YouTube channel, and what's the channel, Caleb? Bass Quest Fishing.
Bass Quest. Yeah, it's just
Bass,
Bass Quest.
Bass Quest. You need to go to his YouTube channel and subscribe to his channel. And
Yeah.
he has a lot of. I actually, right before we went live, about 2 hours before, I was watching one of his videos on fall transition. Guys, he has a lot of great information on there for you. A lot of good educational videos as well, and he is one of the best at being able to explain how, why, and why you want to do a certain thing a certain way. So you need to check out his YouTube
Yeah, I
channel.
geek out on that so much. Like I've always been kind of a self-proclaimed nerd. Like I love learning and just gathering tons of information. I can't even tell you how many thousands of hours I put in just to researching this hobby that most people have. For me, it's more of a passion that I've had forever, and just thousands of hours on the water applying that. That's to me that's the biggest thing. And I tell people all the time, it's time on the water is important, but
Yeah,
good time on the water is essential if you want to become a really good angler.
yeah,
It's about going out there, taking your off time that you're not on the water, learning things, and then going out and trying to apply it.
yeah,
Sacrifice a day to learn something new, and that'll push you so much further in the game, especially with the amount of fishing pressure that we have on our lakes and stuff nowadays. It really pays to be the guy that's doing something a little different, that's willing to branch out, try new things. And a lot of my videos revolve around that. It's about doing stuff that people would think was crazy. It's not supposed to work. If you look up in Bassmaster magazine, this doesn't work right now. But in reality, I'll go out and catch a giant fish on it or a bunch of giant fish. It's
Yeah.
kind of turned into um, a lot of what I talk about and gear myself towards is specifically targeting really big fish.
Yeah.
Right.
We've all caught hundreds of 5 pounders and tons of fish that are 7 pounds and stuff like that. But the deal is dialing in that really small percentage of bass that's in that lake.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that 1%, that 2%, that 5%, the really big fish. I don't care what lake it is. Like I could be up north and I want to catch a 6.5, 7 pounder because that's as big as they get, right?
Yeah.
In that lake over there. I want to catch the biggest fish in any body of water I'm on. So all of what I'm doing is geared exactly towards that.
Yeah.
I'll leave fish that are good fish that most people will think I'm crazy for leaving in order to go over here and attempt to
Yeah.
catch a really big one.
And
Now,
you said something about a couple minutes ago, which really spot on, hit the nail on the head. And one of my biggest questions I get asked to me all the time, whether it be through Messenger or face to face with high school kids, younger anglers,
Yeah.
that they ask me, how do you become a professional fisherman, whether it be a tournament angler or a guide?
Mm.
And one thing I tell them is just every chance you get, fish. Whether if you don't have a boat, go to the bank, go to your local fishing hole,
Yeah.
spend time with the bait in the water. That's the only way you're going to learn is to fish and practice and master your craft by doing it. But yeah,
And
you said
to
spend time
add
with the
to
water
that, I
in
would
your head
say
right there.
extremely important. I tell people if you want to become a really good angler, constantly fish with people that are better than you or better
Yeah,
than you at something.
yeah,
That you can learn something from anybody. One of the coolest tricks that I ever learned, I was fishing down at the dam. There was a little homeless guy down there, and he was catching the huge bluegill on crickets, and he was throwing this little drop shot in there, and I was drop shotting and getting hung every single cast right there, and he never would get hung. And finally I walked over and I was like, dude, how in the world are you casting into the same boil and not getting hung on all these rocks? And he lifted up his rod, and what he had instead of a drop shot weight was a little piece of coat hanger with a tight loop on the top of it. So when it sinks down, it just goes right in between those rocks. You never get hung. I can't tell you how many big fish that I've caught with a little piece of coat hanger down underneath my drop shot drifting down below the dams now. You can learn from anyone. You just got to keep your head on a swivel and
yeah,
choose to,
well, you got to have your eyes
information.
open and just be acceptable to being able to learn from somebody. And so, hey, real quick, we're gonna let Caleb. We're gonna let Caleb grab a bite to eat while we've got
Oh
today's
yeah.
sponsor. And so while we're doing today's sponsor, we're gonna let Caleb grab a couple bites. While
I'm gonna tear up this omelet here, which is absolutely delicious, by the way.
what's the rating on that you're gonna
I'm gonna give it a solid 9.9 for sure.
9.9?
The only thing that would add anything to it would be some onions.
Tell you what, there's only one thing that distracts Colin is that's a big plate of food that he sees.
Big plate of food.
Yeah, right.
So, all right, Norman, what is tell us about our sponsors.
You know what? We're about to let the cat out of the bag, guys. Let's talk about the best non-kept secret on the water. Who knows what fishermen want more than fishermen? Who knows what fishermen need? Who knows what fishermen want better than fishermen themselves? Bruiser Baits is made for fishermen by fishermen. Family owned and operated, they continuously strive to produce the best premium quality baits that are proven to put fish in the boat day in and day out. Baits proven to help the beginner catch more fish and the seasoned tournament angler put more cash in his pocket. Fish the best baits made right here in the US of A. Go to www.bruiserbaits.com and check out their full line of baits, tackle, apparel, and accessories. And when ordering, don't forget at checkout, make sure enter the discount code DECKTALK10. Again, that discount code is DECKTALK10 for an instant customer discount. Also, you want to check out their sister company, Bass Addiction Gear. Go to www.bassaddictiongear. And remember again, enter the discount code DeckTalk10. Again, DeckTalk10. Don't forget, get your instant customer discount, DeckTalk10. Get it on both Bass Addiction Gear products and Bruiser Bait products.
Heck yeah. Now, we do have a
That
couple.
rain noise getting to you at all?
No. No.
Okay, good. It's absolutely pouring outside right now.
And I got nothing but blue skies outside my window.
I tell you what, it came through here. It's
Little
probably
bitty thundy. I mean, it's actually sunny outside right now, and it's like thunder, lightning, and raining like crazy.
Yeah, I was gonna say that what you're getting now is probably what went through here about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. Because man, let me tell you what, the skies opened up, the wind started, the rain started. I was a little bit worried of losing power and knowing, I can't lose power by 6 o'clock because it was so bad right here. The lights flickering.
Yeah. So I do have a couple questions from our viewers.
Go for it.
Well, Jamie Jones says, I've always said that you should be open to learning from whoever you fish with, whether they are better or not. There's always something to learn from them. So that's exactly just like what you had just said.
Yeah.
And then we've got another. Well, Mike, we will get to that question. Caleb will answer that here. He's wanting to know about how do you know when to transition from to come where they're moving out to like a summer pattern out on the wedges and stuff.
Gotcha.
So we will. We're fixing to get onto that, and Caleb's going to share his screen with us. And
I've got it shared right now.
He's got it shared, and I'm going to click on it real quick. I'm going to spotlight that sucker. All right, Caleb, it's all you. And
let's see here.
What about? We're going to just kind of let you just kind of do your thing with it, and you just.
So what are we talking about? We're talking about like spring to summer transition, summer to fall transition.
Let's do spring to summer since that's kind of what we just went through.
Yeah. So one of the easiest places, we're on Chickamauga Lake right here. One of the easiest places to kind of see this transition area is what I think is like super common knowledge on this lake. Everybody knows about Harrison Bay area around the islands here. Everybody knows about Chester Frost. It's two of the most commonly talked about areas on the lake. So these fish, a lot of fish, what they're going to do is they're going to transition back. We hear about travel routes, and what fish use to travel, what their highway is these creek channels. You see, they're going to pull in and they're going to hit on this secondary stuff along the way. They'll get on this, they'll use like these bluff walls to transition down, and then they'll get around here and they'll start to scatter out once they get back into these creeks wherever they want to be, and they'll start to spawn in these shallow areas. And there will actually be fish that will spawn on offshore stuff as well that's shallow enough. That same thing happens on main lake flats. So especially around docks, like there's a really good line of docks right over here across from Sequoia. There's a ton of fish that actually spawn main lake around those docks and in these little cuts. So they even spawn out here on the main river bars too, around like duck blinds and stuff. The biggest thing that you can learn about fish is, we think of a lot of times when people are talking about this, we talk in absolutes, like the fish are always going to go back, or that the fish will transition out at a certain time. There's different populations of fish in any lake that do completely different things. So a lot of these fish want to live deep year round. The fish that I'm targeting right now are a lot of the fish that like to be deep. They like to be main lake. They like to be on ledges. Then they're going to be on the ledges in the wintertime. They're going to be on the ledges during the summertime, and they're going to be close to the ledges on these flats during the spring and the fall. They're going to spawn on those flats as well. There's a lot of fish that are residents to big creeks. Some of my favorite creeks on the lake, big creeks, is like Saudi Creek up here. Huge creeks, almost like a lake unto itself. There's fish that live their entire lives in this one creek. They have no reason to transition all the way out here. Same thing with Possum Creek. In the middle of our lake, we have some of our biggest creeks. Sail Creek's the same way. So there's different populations of fish. Don't ever get locked in, or don't ever let people tell you that all the fish go deep in the summertime, or all the fish go deep in the wintertime, or all the fish go up and spawn, there's a big population of fish that don't even spawn every year. It's actually like something like 30% of fish don't even spawn every year. They might spawn every other year. They might absorb their eggs that year and not spawn at all. So there's a whole lot of things, that variables that go into there, and don't ever think of anything as an absolute. But generally, what's going to happen is these fish are going to move from what I call, like, once they get done spawning, they get out into these kind of mid-depth areas. And a lot of them that have spawned on flats are still in these creek channels. Like, they're going to pull out to these creek channels. The fish that actually went into the creek and are migrating out will use the creek channels as well. So what you'll start to notice is on these little secondary areas, secondary points, you'll start to get a lot of fish that will pile up. And they're not real big schools a lot of times. You're talking about schools of fish that are maybe anywhere from 5 to 15 fish strong. I usually don't stop unless there's at least 5 of them. And so you can kind of hit these fish as they go out. You can see right here, there's a couple road beds. These are prime areas post-spawn for fish to stage up. And what you'll find is there'll be fish that will be here all summer on some of these post-spawn areas. They're not going to leave. Some of these fish are residents to the creek. They don't transition out, but what you'll see is more and more of a population of fish, your main lake fish that just stay main lake their whole life, and some of the fish that actually do migrate will begin to move out to big main lake structures. Now, some of the most easy ones to key in on are going to be these openings, like the very end of the creek channel, where a creek channel meets the main channel. Another great area is anytime that you've got a turn in the channel, and it could be the inside or outside. So, areas like this where the channel itself is swinging around, and you'll have this flat, you see a shallow, and it starts to deepen up. And what you see is like a transition. See how tight these contours are here? And they're not as tight here. So you can think about that angle, 45, 45, 45, and then it kind of flattens out a little bit, and then it gets sharp again. Those are prime areas that fish can hang out right here and draft current all summer long. And as bait comes down out here, he can just jump out there and feed on. That's a prime example. Another prime example is, your main lake islands or humps that are out here. A lot of fish are going to group up on these. Some of the bigger schools on a lot of these lakes will get on these, and they're some of the most highly pressured fish, but just a ton of numbers out there. There's, depending on what school you're at on this lake right now, some of these schools are got to be close to 500 fish, maybe even more strong. And some of the other bigger schools are in the 200s, and then it kind of stair steps off from there, as far as these size. But right now, I'm targeting schools, especially with a live bait. I try to make it to where everybody can have fun on the lake. I don't want to burn every ledge and stuff, so I try to stick to these major community holes, with just a huge population of fish. That way, I'm not burning up all these little sneak ledges and stuff like that. But you can go down, and once you know what you're looking for, you can go down to these. I mean, I could be looking at Gunnersville right now, and I could tell you right where fish are going to be. The main thing is when you're looking at this mapping, I think of it as this huge lake right here. To me, it's just a trout stream, right? It's just a trout stream. Break it down to something small that when you got trout and you're coming down this little creek right here, you got the shallow side over here, where the current's not really getting to it very good, and then you've got your big boulder out here in the middle. So your most aggressive fish are going to be on the front side of that eddy. You think of it, so you got this round boulder right there. The actual eddy doesn't look like a tail behind that boulder. Everybody thinks about the eddy as the tail behind, but really what it is it is a big comet shape. So around the sides of it, you actually have areas that have current breaks. In the front, on the nose where the current is impacting the hardest, there's actually a current break right there too. There's dead water. A fish can actually sit there and not have to work very hard. And then the most well-known one is going to be behind the structure itself. Now, we figured that out a long time ago fishing duck blinds on these main lake flats here, on these shallow bars and stuff like that. You got all these duck blinds, and the fish are rarely right on the duck blind. They're rarely even inside the duck blind. You think about all this like great cover right there. They're usually about 10 to 15 feet below it and about 10 to 15 feet above it, because that's where the current breaks are, and that's where they can easily feed. it's just it's interesting stuff like that, and it all boils down to just kind of breaking it down into something that you can understand. But if you go down through here and you see like an inside turn, or you see a change in the contours where it's going from a really sharp contour, which is more like a bluff wall, right? Bluff wall is just like where a ledge a lot of times is just like a bluff wall. That's all it is. I mean,
Right.
it's just what you can't see because it's under the water. So when you have a bluff wall and you're going down that, and all of a sudden there's like a rock slide area, or there's a transition with a little point or nub on that bluff wall, 9 times out of 10, that's where you're going to catch your fish, or on the transition on that bluff wall, right? That's
Right.
where the high percentage area is. So you can look at this, and even though it's underwater, it's the same thing, the same concepts apply. And so once you start to figure out what you're looking for on here, you can, you could, say you've never fished Chickamauga Lake in your life, but you know a little bit about ledge fishing, you can get on here and break this down. One of the coolest videos I've seen in a while is Johnny Schultz, Fish the Moment. He has one of the best channels out there on YouTube as far as information, especially fish patterns, sonar technology, how to utilize technology, settings, blah blah blah. I mean, I learned so much from watching his channel, and he does lake map breakdowns a lot, similar to what I do. But he did one of Chickamauga. He's never fished here before, but when he went through that video, he pointed out 10 spots that are all really good areas to fish because he
Yeah.
knows what he's looking for, right? You can look. I mean, where I caught like a 28-pound bag of smallmouth a couple years ago in Michigan. We fished a great big lake up there, and all the fish I caught on places that I had picked out like 2 months before because it was the
Yeah.
right stuff. You know what I mean? I knew what I was looking for. So when I got there, it takes a whole lot. That homework makes such a huge difference.
Yeah.
And
So
when
do
you
you
catch a fish in
use?
a spot, look at like what it looked like on the map, so you can learn. So okay, it worked right here. I caught a fish right there. Why did I catch a fish right there?
Yeah.
Always look for the why.
So do you use like Google Earth as
Yes,
much also, or?
yes, I use Google Earth a lot, especially on lakes that fluctuate, because when you have low water events, it can be really helpful to see where road beds are, bridge abutments, big sections of brush or standing timber, stump flats. You can kind of see all that. But one of the biggest things that you can really see is if you start going back in the history on Google Earth. When you get back in that history and you start going from image to image, year to year, you can see trends as far as which creeks pump out dirty water, which creeks don't, what creeks take a long time to clean out, what creeks don't. Where are your major grass lines that are there every year? Where are some grass lines that are not there every year? So you can start to break down and pattern a lake before you get there, and you can play it to your strengths that way.
Right.
Yeah. We got a question
Yeah,
uh, from a guy named Chris. He says, "So do big bass, do they will they stay up shallow too, or will they do they all kind of transition out to the ledges?"
that's a really good question. So there's going to be big fish that stay deep, and there's going to be big fish that stay shallow. Now, that could be main lake or that could be back in creeks. But I will tell you this, if you want to catch the biggest fish, the oldest fish in your area, you're not going to catch her down in really deep water, especially largemouth. I'm talking specifically largemouth. And here's the reason why. I mean, think about that fish. That is a grandma right there, right? That is an old fish. And a lot of what they do revolves around comfort at that point. So the biggest fish in these kind of lakes, especially a lowland reservoir, in my opinion, is going to live 14 foot and shallower year round, regardless of what's going on, as long as you have water that is conducive to that. Now, there's lakes where fish don't get that big, but there's lakes here like these fish can get old and they can get really big. And they have the benefit in the backs of these creeks of having cool water coming in from the the mountains. They have underwater aquifers that come in, freshwater springs everywhere. So these fish have the ability to get into places where it's comfortable for them to be, where they have the forage that they need to get gigantic, and then they can stay in a comfortable area. So if you got a lake where you got like a thermocline, that's a good example of a lake where your big fish are just going to naturally stay a little shallower. But in these river systems where you've got constant flow, we're going to have fish even when the water temps hit 90s on the surface. Main lake is going to be relatively stable. Now, still, I notice that the biggest fish that I catch are often not super super deep. Like I can go to several spots on Chickamauga right now and catch fish out of 35 to 40 foot of water.
Yeah.
But you catch a lot that are anywhere from like 5 to 7 pounds when you're doing that.
Yeah.
When I catch that like 9 or 10 and a half or something like that on a ledge, that fish is usually in like 22, 18, 16, and they're not really as closely associated with the rest of the school. They hang loosely in the same area, and they usually hang with a couple fish around their size. Some of the biggest fish that I see on the lake, especially on Chickamauga, actually hang with stripers. They're like the cleanup crew for stripers. That's where your big double digits that you're going to see out on ledges, and a lot of times they're suspended up.
Right.
They'll be over 35 foot of water, but they're never more than like 10 to 15 foot deep.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you said that because the other day I was out on Chick up towards the wildlife
Oh yeah,
area coming out of the Hiwassee, and I seen stripers going crazy,
yep,
but was able uh, to see up underneath them
yep,
that it was probably I think that it was about I'd say about 6 to 8 feet below where they were at was
yep.
where you just seen it was about three of them that I seen on my depth finder that was just monster fish that was up underneath them. So it's kind
Yeah,
of interesting that you
yeah,
said
and you can tell by the shape if you're looking at them on live scope. You can tell by the shape. Stripers very obvious shape wise, and even catfish they're pretty obvious the way they look. If you see a bass on there, like a big bass, what it's going to look like on scope is a crappie mark, so a tall oval that's bright white hot. Right, that thing it's dense, and then it's going to have a tail behind it moving. When you see that, you're most likely dealing with an 8+ pound fish. And those are the ones that hang out right underneath those stripers. Stripers, see bass, big bass, they're always moving. Like you never see them sitting still. They have a speed. Like I can see it on live scope. I can tell you just by looking at that fish and the speed that it's cruising at, what kind of fish it is. Catfish meander. They're slow. It's like a big shark, right? They're slow. They're moving. A bass, a big bass, those ones that are anywhere from 6 to 10+ pounds, they cruise at about the same speed that you can slow roll a spinnerbait. So think about what that speed is. Throw your Alabama rig out there, throw your spinnerbait out there, your swim bait, whatever it is, and slow roll it like you're throwing a big willow leaf. And that's the speed. If you see a big fish with a big head and a tail behind it swimming at that speed, that's what you're after.
Right.
If you see a more of a torpedo shaped big fish that's cruising about like you're covering water with a spinnerbait a little faster, that's a big striper. It's going to be that way every time, unless they're on bait and they're actively feeding. Then they're all going to be moving fast. But what you'll see,
right.
striper are really really good at corralling pods of big gizzard shad. That's what they feed on. They feed on those, and they feed on skipjack most of the time out here on these ledges. And they don't even get excited unless they see something this big. And that's what the bass are after too. So what you'll see on scope is you'll see maybe 30 big gizzard shad push through, and they're almost always higher in the water column. Those gizzards, you'll see threadfin will be sometimes 10 foot down, and they'll be like a 15-foot tall school, real dense. Threadfin, you can see individual, or gizzard shad, you can see individual fish.
Right.
And if it almost looks like crappie, then that's the right size gizzard
Yeah.
shad.
And
And that's
explain to
where
our viewers, Caleb, as well, why the bigger bass hang out under, say, schools of striper or even schools of smaller bass. Why are they hanging out under that
Yeah,
school?
so that's the thing. So again, we're talking about an old fish here. We're talking about a smart fish, and so what they're going to do is they're going to play off the strengths of those other fish. It's the same thing where a lot of slower species of fish are going to hang around tuna or mahis in saltwater because they're better at corralling the bait. They're better at keeping it compacted and scared, right? So you're just down there. You don't have to worry about it. when those ones that are injured or they're trying to get away and they make the wrong move, you just kind of cruise around with those fish, and when one makes the wrong move, you slurp it up.
Yeah,
It's an
exactly.
opportunity thing because a bass naturally is an ambush predator, so they're
Right.
using the strengths of another species of fish. It's a symbiotic relationship, and that's why you find bass around white bass a lot too, because white bass travel in bigger schools and they tend to, corral some of that smaller bait better, especially in the fall. So they'll do all the work, and the bass will just kind of sit on the outskirts and mop up because
Yeah,
it's easier for a bass to hunt down a broken up school. If you get back in a say in a creek on a flat or something, in the fall time, and you're seeing these big beautiful schools of bait, or you're out on a ledge and you're seeing these big beautiful schools of bait, you're in the wrong place.
yeah.
Yeah.
What
And
you want
and
to see is you want to see misshapen schools.
yeah.
You want to see schools that are breaking up because there's predators in there that are able to corral, break up the school, mess with the dynamics of what those fish are doing, and that's the best feeding opportunity for a bass.
And a bigger bass and an older bass, their metabolism is a lot lower than say
Yes,
a
because they're
younger
not
bass.
gonna. They're
So
just chilling, even in the summertime. Like,
exactly, and that's why if you find a school of say 2 to 4 pound bass,
yep,
and and there's going to be a mixture of 8, 9, 10 pound bass in that school, you almost like you have to weed through those smaller bass to get to that
yes,
one huge bass because the metabolism is just a lot slower, a lot lower in the bigger bass where the smaller fish are just so aggressive. They're always going to beat that big fish to the bait first.
and that's a
So,
big time thing in Florida too,
yeah,
because those
and
fish
basically
actually kind of tight pack better.
right, and
Um,
that kind of goes to what you're talking about. Why the larger older bass hang out under the schools. Now
yep,
I've seen the bigger bass hang out under schooling fish, meaning 12, 13, 14 inches, where they're
yep,
actually busting bait on top, pushing bait up. Well,
yep,
underneath that spool, if you can fish schooling fish, whether you're throwing something to mimic what they're eating, but if you could actually get that bait to fall past the initial school, it's going to drop down in front of the bigger fish because the bigger fish are going to hang out under those small fish that are just so aggressive. They're waiting for them smaller bass to maim or injure something that they don't get. That kind of makes it an easier meal for them bigger fish with that a lot less
and I
lower metabolism.
noticed that a ton, especially late summer, like early fall transition, late summer time.
Right?
You'll see a bunch of big bass mixed in with a school feeding
Yeah.
on those little, like by that time they're shad that are about what
Hmm.
2.5 inches long or so.
Yeah.
Um, but there's this thing that happens as soon as like the fall transition kind of actually happens and gets in full swing, where the big bass are no longer keyed in on the little bait. They're actually eating those 12 to 14 inch bass and eating those big white bass.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've watched an 8 to 10 pound fish come up and eat a 14 incher off the end of my line. And that's why a lot of times at that time is when I swap my techniques a little bit. Instead of throwing a single swim bait, I'm going to pick up a rig. Or instead of throwing, a single swim bait or something like that, I'm going to pick up a big deep diving jerk bait because the little fish will still eat it. And I can't tell you how many big ones I've caught actually eating the small fish off of that jerk bait or eating the small fish off of the rig and then hooking themselves inadvertently. So you
Yeah.
can kind of pull a bait and switch on them where they're not even keyed in. Like you can watch them; they'll come up. Your little bass comes up, jumps. Freaking 9 pounder comes up, eats the little bass, but happens to get the other hook in the process. Then you catch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we got a couple questions. Um, Chase asked, said Caleb, what did you say the name of that guy that breaks down the lake maps?
Oh yeah,
Johnny Schultz,
Johnny
wasn't it?
Schultz, Fish the Moment is his
Yeah,
YouTube channel and his
and
website. You can actually buy lake map
yeah,
breakdowns.
and I've done
On his
that.
website.
I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah,
Uh, I had done it just to kind of compare what I have to and what you do, and it's like by seasons is how they do it. And so I bought one for Chickamauga to kind of compare his uh, where they say their points and stuff where they would fish if they were fishing Chickamauga during that time.
yeah,
But and which I mean a lot of them points that he had on there was places that I'm like Man, I wish you wouldn't have put that out there. But
And that's the thing. Like Johnny is an extremely smart and intelligent angler, and a lot of there's there's a lot of professional fishermen that maybe don't have um, that part of their game dialed in as far as like the mapping. I tell you, someone who does like really good map study work in advance and finds his spots in advance is Brian Latimer and Jacob Wheeler are the first two that come to mind. Like they are
yeah,
really good about doing their homework. Iaconelli's another good one. When you hear him talk about like what he's lining up on, what he's looking at, you can tell that he's done that work in advance.
yeah,
He
Yeah.
knows where he's going to fish in advance.
yeah,
He knows where he's most likely going to catch the fish. He might not know the cast yet, right?
right.
Exactly. Exactly where that waypoint is in river systems like we're fishing here. I can tell you right where fish are going to be on a ledge, but when you get there, you're going to have to figure out, depending on what the current's doing, exactly what cast to make in order to get that swing. It's just like, say, if I'm waded out in a trout stream and I see this great big rainbow on the tail or the front end of this boulder over here, it might take me 10 or 12 casts to get my spinner or whatever I'm throwing to swing just the right way to trigger a bite.
So does boat positioning matter when you're doing that then?
Tons. I mean, even with live shad, you can put a shad right on top of a fish, but not have the right swing on it and not get touched. And then you reposition the boat. You make a cast in a little bit different area. Sometimes it's literally 5 foot. Like if you don't hit this 5 foot little circle, I'm going to tell you to reel it in and throw it right back in there again
Right,
until you can
right.
hit that little 5 foot circle pointed directly at that dock 300 yards away. So it swings just right and triggers those fish because that's what it takes to catch fish that are 6, 7, 8, 9 pounds instead of fish
Yeah,
that are 3, 4 pounds.
And you got to
And
realize
I'm more
too,
natural.
yeah, them bigger and older fish are a heck of a lot smarter than them
Yeah,
young fish too, because they've seen just about everything. They've seen just about every bait you could possibly throw at them. They've seen every scenario that you could throw at them because
yeah.
they are an older fish. So there's not much them fish have not seen. So they're a
And
lot keener to what you're doing as well
I
as an
say
angler.
that a lot too. One of the most important things is to, if you want to catch a giant fish, play the elements, play your hand so that it throws that fish off its game, right?
Yeah,
So these fish now, they've been on the ledges since middle of May. These fish have seen a ton of baits. Several of them have been caught already. Now is the time that is extremely, extremely important to be fishing with something different, but mainly to be extremely intentional on presentation, whether it's boat positioning, whether it's the cast. And the same thing goes like some of the biggest fish that I catch in the spring, I'll catch during a high water event, or some of the biggest fish that you catch on artificial in the summertime, you catch at night. So you take some of those fish, the fish's natural senses, and catch them in motion too. Spring and fall is a great time to catch a giant fish because they haven't been sitting on the same general area for months, right? They're in
yeah,
transition. So she just pulled up on this little secondary point on a boulder that she hasn't even sat on before. She's just taking a 30-minute break, and all of a sudden you present a lure to her. She's not used to seeing that over and over and over, pounded on her.
yeah,
So that gives you a chance. And so as many of those variables that you can put in your favor are great. And then that's when you get out and you work hard, specifically fishing for that right fish. So you get as many variables as you can, and then you ensure that you put yourself in big fish areas. If you have enough experience on a lake, like on Chickamauga, I know I can put myself around big fish.
right, right,
You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah,
Like I can do it, and then I can actually put myself in position to make a good cast on, especially now with the advent of live scope. Like if you knew where fish were before, and if you really studied that live scope, I've kind of geeked out on that the last few months and really dialed in. Like I can look at a fish and tell you within a pound how big it is. I can
right.
look at a fish when I cast over it within just like the way that fish turns. I'll tell you right then if he's going to bite it or not, because you
yeah.
get to really study the fish behavior, but you have to be intentional about it in order to get to that point.
Right.
Right. Now, Dylan, which if you don't know Dylan,
Oh
Dylan
yeah,
is with Wishing I Was Fishing and Talking Tackle. He's a good buddy of ours.
yep,
Since
hammer.
you, yeah, he is a hammer. But you was talking about big fish, and his question is the next state record in Chickamauga?
You know, I feel like there are teener sized fish in Chickamauga. I personally have seen a couple fish that I felt like could have gotten to that size. One specifically, I tell this story to everybody, but I was way in the back of a creek, saw this fish one day, came back. It was with another one I thought was a 6 pounder. Long story short, I catch the 6 pounder. The big one swims by it, doesn't eat it. 6 pounder comes in, it's like a 9 pounder. The other fish looked twice as big.
Right.
It absolutely dwarfed that 9 pounder. The 9 pounder looked like a 5 or 6 pounder until I got her in. It was amazing. So there are huge fish in this lake. I've had, doing the live bait thing, especially big live bait in the wintertime. I've been, blessed to be around some of the biggest fish and to see big fish. I know for a fact that I've had 3 clients that have had teener sized fish hooked, and we just hadn't got one in the boat. And that's just in the last few months.
Wow.
So it's going to happen. I said that before last year. I said it's going to happen. We're going to catch a 50-pound bag because we had like 4 or 5 chances at it. Finally, we got a 50-pound bag. We're going to catch a 13-pound fish. Just the law of averages. There are huge fish in this lake. I feel like you're talking about a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of fish that even have a chance to get that big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
No,
talking
no,
about? Like, it's a very, very small percentage of fish that make it to 8 pounds. A much
right.
smaller percentage make it to 10 pounds. And on this lake, there's a decent amount of 11-plus-pound fish.
Yeah. No,
Right.
you
You have a
someone
very
that
small pool and a very small window of time every year to get a chance at that fish.
right now have you
It's
ever
literally
caught
1 in a million, probably, right?
exactly? Have you ever caught a double digit?
Yes, twice. I
Right.
actually did it once this year with my net. I went to casting at shad, and I threw a cast. Of course, I didn't have my live scope. I was just blindly casting off the dock at Wolf
Yeah.
Deaver Creek. Like literally, I just cast it. I saw a bait fish flip, grabbed my net, threw it off the dock, and caught one that was like 10.58 and one that was 10.20 something.
Oh.
Like, heck, I should have just fished here.
Now, Dylan, he said boat position is everything.
And Dylan is one of the best when it comes to offshore fishing like that. You want somebody that can really show you like some of this offshore stuff and boat positioning and then presenting the right bait. Dylan's really good about having the right baits in his arsenal to target that fish no matter where it is in the water column, what stage of activity it's in, whether it's at the top schooling on a big gizzard shad, whether it's mid column corralling a gizzard shad, or whether it's just glued to bottom just chilling there. He's going to have something in his arsenal ready to cast that fish, and that's one of the things that only comes with experience. I know Dylan will tell you this, Tanner will tell you this, is it boils down to looking at that fish, especially on live scope or anything like that, and seeing the behavior of that fish, what you're getting, the cues that you're getting, so that you don't pick up the wrong thing, right?
Yeah.
If you pick up the wrong thing, it's over. You lost your shot. You got to pick up the right thing. And so knowing what weapon to pull out of your little weapon pouch is like the biggest thing. And Dylan is probably one of the very best on the lake at that. Greg Warsham, the other manager, owner of Talk and Tackle over there, probably one of the top 3 to 5 fishermen on the lake. You'll never know because he's so humble. But like you get out in the boat with him and he's going to crack you every time. He could not fish for a month and like go out with you and make you feel like you've never fished before. He's really good. Those boys know their stuff, and that's where I hang out there all the time. I learned a ton just hanging out with those boys.
Yeah. And that's one thing. Like we push a lot, Caleb, about like going to your local bait shops and
Gosh, yeah,
because there's no telling how much that you can learn just listening to people. And
Exactly.
and so we that's and we do it also because we want to be able to bring more business to our locals because Bass Pro gets enough and Cabela's and
Johnny Morris, he's just gonna have to deal with it because I'm
right.
gonna hang out with my boys and buy something over there.
Yeah.
But
Support your local tackle shops.
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
but Jamie Jones asked or he says, I know sometimes you have to buy baits, but mostly you catch your own. How do you go about deciding where and how you're going to catch your bait that day?
So that's a really interesting question, and it has been a learning curve for me because in the past when I've done this live bait fishing that everybody's like knows me for now, I started doing it in the wintertime. And so
Right.
I was, I know enough about the lake and I know where bait is, and I get some tips from people on that stuff. But what I've found is there's bait everywhere on this lake. A lot of Tennessee River lakes, there's bait everywhere. What I'm trying to do is find bait that is catchable and hopefully easily catchable.
Yeah.
And that usually boils down to try to find them as shallow as you can and find them in dirty water if you can. If
Yeah.
you can do one of those two things, or both of those two things preferably, you'll be able to consistently catch bait. One thing with gizzard shad specifically, they really like to hang around some of that dirtier water. I don't know what it is. Well, they're a filter feeder. Shad, both redfin and gizzard shad are filter feeders. They feed on stuff that you can't even see that's in the water.
Yeah.
So when you have water that has less visibility, it's just like Texas. Texas lakes, you get that kind of weird green tint to them. That's why they're so healthy
Yeah.
Right.
because it's like they have that micro biology just going like crazy in that lake. So you'll have more of that in a little bit dirtier water situation. So what you end up having is more age class of fish, shad in there, and they're thicker. They tend to sit a little bit shallower. It just makes my life easier. Right now, the biggest struggle for me right now. I've noticed, so I can't keep really big shad alive, like enough of them, because we're going through so many on these ledges. So what I'm having to find is like these gizzards that are anywhere from 5 to 7 inches long. That's like the key. But where I'm catching them, there's billions of fry everywhere, and there's fry anywhere from that big to that big. And then there's also tons of threadfin that are like 3.5, 4 inches. And so I've had to look on the live scope and figure out how to dial that thing in. So when I look at a school of fish, I know exactly what size it is
Right.
and what species it is before I even throw on it. Otherwise, there's only so many times you can throw a 17-pound baseball around. I'll tell you that. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you're throwing it on the fish, getting the job
And
done.
that was amazing. One of the last times that me and you went out, Caleb,
Yeah,
that you was using the live scope,
yeah,
and there's no telling how many big bait balls that we passed because you're like, no, those are too big and those are too small, and then you're like,
yeah,
that's the one we want, and so I mean, and that was to me, and which I told you then that it just surprised the crap out of me.
yeah.
Really, the technology to be able. I mean, it's not just for catching big bass or crappie and stuff. You was utilizing that to be able to get your bait uh,
In the right
for to
area.
have a great day out
Sure.
on the water.
Because these fish, they start to, when you have a huge amount of bait. So say you wake up every day and there's a buffet everywhere you go, right?
Calm down,
You're
Colin.
gonna start
Yeah.
picking the filet mignon, right? Like you're gonna start taking the good cuts.
Yeah.
You're gonna take that, 16-ounce ribeye instead of like a little piece of New York strip, right?
Right.
So if you got all these options available to you, you start to key in on certain size of bait. It happens a ton. I learned this years ago, fishing below the dams. You start fishing tail races. You can sit on like a rock pile, say, and the current's sweeping past it, and you're casting and you're casting, you're casting, and you're catching fish, you're catching fish. All right, so schools of bait that are this big are swimming by, and the white bass and skipjack going insane. Boom, 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 blowing up everywhere. You're casting around, you catch a little bass or two. Then another school of threadfin come through, and they're like 3, 4 inches long. And all of a sudden, there's like smallmouth, largemouth, like blowing up all around the boat. They're like 2, 3, 4 pounders, pretty awesome. Then all of a sudden, a school of threadfin that are like 7, 8 inch goes through, and every fish that's schooling near the boat is over 6 pounds. Those fish were there, but they didn't care at all.
Yeah.
They had zero desire to even put it forth any effort until the right size bait comes through. And
Right.
you can sit there on those spots and watch that happen in cycles all day long.
Yeah. Uh, Michael Lindell, he's down in he's down in the Everglades,
Yeah.
He asked, "Do you use a lot of big shad glide baits?"
No. Yes, I do. Don't tell anybody
There,
else.
there's not a chance that you can go. You see Caleb at a ramp, and there's not one in the boat. I'll just tell you that.
Yeah, guaranteed. It might be hiding in the rod locker, but
Yeah, and I'll tell you a quick story too, and I might have to hire Caleb sometime here to kind of show me a little bit about glide bait fishing. You know, coming from Florida, I've been up here now for about 3 years, but coming from Florida, we don't throw glide baits in Florida in the reeds.
yeah, that doesn't seem
But
very fun at all.
yeah, I told Colin about 7, 8 months ago. I says, man, next year I'm gonna go out with glide bait and just fish all day, just try to learn it. Cause what a lot of people don't realize is there is a technique. There, it's almost like an art form to throw a glide bait the proper
It
way, and
is.
me never doing it. So I told Colin, I am gonna get out next year, and
Well, Caleb's the one that taught
even if
me how to use it.
that's what I'm saying.
There's
Me and
so
Caleb,
many
Me
me and
out
Caleb's
nuances.
gonna
on
hook up.
a
I
little
will
dam.
hire Caleb to take. It would be
So
two of
I
us out, and I'll have Caleb show me exactly how I need to throw a
Yeah,
glide bait to be successful. But man, I watch glide bait fishing on TV, on the
it's
YouTube,
so fun.
whatever, and it just looks so fun.
So Chris Sumrell, the owner of Bass Attitude Fishing, I wear all their gear and stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
where the hats and stuff come from. Great buddy of mine, and he is the one who I was fishing glide baits, but he was so far along. He'd been fishing them so long. He taught me just a ton about glide bait fishing, and then we started to learn more stuff together. And what I can tell you is, I think he put it in probably one of the best ways that I've ever heard it put. He said it's one of the purest form of finesse fishing there is. He was a big time fly fisherman. He was a fly fisherman guide out in Montana for years, and just amazing with a spin rod. But you've also put a big swim bait stick in his hand, and that's what you're doing. It is in its truest form. You're pulling a fish, making it react, making it change its behavior, and doing it while it's in sight. A lot of times
yeah.
with a glide bait.
And it all has to do with how you retrieve it with your handle, correct? How you're winding it.
Every it's rod movement, it's handle movement, it is the type of line that you have, it is how you adjust the bait, whether you put a swivel on the front of it to make it glide wider, or whether you tie direct make it glide tighter, whether you carve out the sides a little bit so you can get a wide and slow glide, or whether you keep them tight so that you can chop. So
Yeah,
there's tons. Every bait's different. I can literally, we could go to the store right now and you could buy five of the same glide bait, and we could take them home, and I could turn that into five different baits.
yeah.
wow.
And even if you just used them factory, I can almost guarantee you that you would have to learn. I call it learning the retrieve on each bait. Every bait is special. Every bait has its own little nuances to it. So it's like you got to dial that in. But the main thing is you just need to know what the fish like to see, first
Yeah,
of all.
yeah.
And one of the biggest things is a slow sink. You want that thing, you want it to almost hold in the water. Just like in the dead of winter when you got that sinking jerk bait, you know she's perfect when she's doing this.
Yeah,
Just that slow sink. That is what you want your glide bait to do. You don't want your glide bait doing this, because what you lose then is the ability to draw the fish while it's still in sight. You don't want your glide bait to sink out of sight while you're pulling a fish. So I want to go by that log, boom, 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 and then I pull that fish. She comes from 6 foot away, and she closes and she closes. And if I can get her, on that hang time when that thing glides out, if I can get it to slow glide and nose down just ever so slightly, she'll close that distance. If I can get her to close to within a foot and a half, got her.
Yeah.
Next time I glide it, I'm going to glide it tight a couple times, boom, see how she reacts to that. If she doesn't like that, I'll glide it wide again. I'll pull her again, because by that time she's committed, right? You pulled her all away from that brush pile or that dock, whatever she's sitting on. And then the
Right.
next time you might just do one sharp, hard glide, turn it all the way towards her, and she might eat it that way. But
yeah,
the closer you can pull that fish, and that's one thing too, is the lineup is like key with that. Play the wind to your advantage. Cast into the wind. That way, when you're pulling that fish back and out of that cover, if she's not making a decision fast enough, you don't run out of real estate, because you can get off the trolling motor and drift back.
right.
Right.
I can't tell you how many fish that I've caught just literally because I had an extra 30 foot that I just let the wind pushed me back and kept working my bait without actually reeling it.
Yeah. Now, we got another question. Is so it says, can you use the same mapping on a highland reservoir as you do a river?
Same mapping on Highland reservoirs.
I guess they're talking about as in trying to find like how the ledges and stuff, like how you find fish.
No, they fish. So Highland Reservoir is usually quite a bit different. You can still have current that'll run through a Highland Reservoir, but one of the biggest things you'll see with that is very steep drop off banks. So a lowland reservoir like Chickamauga, what you see a lot is you see like the main river channel where you have your deeper water, and then you have the lowland areas that were flooded. So you've got a lot of shallow water involved on there too, and that changes the current dynamic a whole lot. What happens on these highland reservoirs, you've got so many good points, right? You got good points everywhere, secondary points, major points, and those fish tend to run those points. Now, if you have an offshore hump or something like that, like an underwater island, that can
Right.
be key. Or a lot of times, what you'll see on those highland reservoirs is you'll see a long point running out real deep, right? But somewhere along that line, it runs deep, and then the contours flatten out just a little bit, and then it drops
Right.
again. Or you'll have like a little U, like a little saddle. Those little nuances offshore are really good. That kind of translates from.
Now, does it have to be? Does it have to be like a big, like let's say you're in 15 foot of water? Does it have to have a big drop to like let's say 20 foot for them to stay in there, or could it even actually just be like less than a foot? Let's say 8 inches. Does that will that
I
kind of
feel
hold
like
them or
with the Highland Reservoir specifically, having more dramatic um, motions or movement within the contours is better.
right?
Those little subtleties I see more like when you're on fishing flats on a lowland reservoir. Sometimes it's like you have the high point of this flat, and then you have a slightest ditch that goes to another flat, like sandbar area, and those
Right.
fish like 8 to 12 inches makes a huge difference. I know in Florida, Norman can probably attest to that too. Like 6 inches makes a huge difference down there
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
But when
yeah.
you have those highland reservoirs where those fish are naturally deeper, it doesn't seem to play as much unless you're fishing really deep. Like if you get out there and you start fishing rock veins that are not really, they don't have as many contours on them, but it's just like these big flat contours where you've actually got just bedrock down there basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes those little divots, or if there's a little hole in them, those little subtleties can make a huge difference on
Yeah.
those type areas. But most of the time when you're talking about highland reservoirs, you figure out where they are on these tributaries, because it's like usually it's crazy. It's got all these little cuts and pockets and points and stuff like that. Figure out
Right.
where you're getting bit, whether it's in kind of in the pockets in the creek areas, or if it's main lake in the pockets, or if it's just main lake points. Then you can just run it because there's a million of it around. It's just like standing timber. You figure
Right.
out they're on the big trees on standing timber, or if they're on a certain kind of tree on standing timber, then it's everywhere. You start to run it once you know what you're looking for.
Yeah. Exactly.
We've already had you on for almost an hour and 15 minutes, Caleb. We don't want to keep you too much, but
Yeah,
we got two more questions,
sounds
and
good.
then
Sounds
and
good.
then we'll let you go. Uh, Bo Bain says, "We have all heard and seen the bad shape the catfish have been in on the lake, but I wanted to ask, have you seen any difference with the bass, such as sores or abnormalities?"
No, the bass that I'm catching are really healthy. I've caught a few of them that are paper thin, and I think that's like, and they kind of have that misty slime coat to them. That happens every year to a lot of fish that kind of come out of the spawn in a bad way. And there's also that happens with fish that just get hooked. Let's say they got deep hooked by somebody, or they've got a Cinco down their throat that they can't get rid of. That kind of thing is going to cause some issues with the fish. But overall, like, to me, it was a non-issue when it came to the catfish thing. It was, yes, it was weird that we had that many, but it's nothing new. It happens every year. We have a die off of these younger male catfish, and it's usually to a pretty good sized degree. And usually there's drum mixed in and stuff. The weirdest part about this one to me was that it seemed like it was like 1 year class. of
Yeah,
catfish,
it was
specifically
all
channel
about the
catfish.
same size. Yeah,
Yeah, that was the weirdest part about that. But I think that was kind of like that just happened to be where those fish were in that particular stage of the spawn or whatever they were doing that caused that. Because if it would have been a bigger issue, you would have seen it in every species. You would have seen it in different sizes. Like I've caught some of the most beautiful, healthy catfish out there the last few trips. It's
yeah,
unreal, and tons of them in the exact same size that we had the issues with.
right.
There's literally like I found a school, like no joke, below Wolf Teever. I found a school that I kept idling the last few days, and I was like, "There's no way those are bass. Like, there's too many of them. They're not really set up exactly right." But I told my guys, I'm like, "We're dropping down bait just to see," and they immediately triple up on catfish. There's literally a school of 200 catfish down below the day marker right there in like 40 foot of water. You could go down there with chicken livers or something and probably catch 100 of them if you wanted to. I mean, I don't know. They're solid, thick.
Right.
So to me, it was a non-issue. It's kind of an anomaly. If we would have seen a lot more dead fish, different sizes, different species floating around, then you start thinking, okay, chemicals, or we start thinking, maybe it's a thermocline issue or something like that, some kind of dead water since we weren't running current, right? So
Right.
you don't have as much oxygen in the water. Maybe they got in a dead zone, couldn't swim out of it. But it makes no sense that it's just one year
Can
class.
Can you explain to people what a thermocline is?
Ooh,
You
yeah.
said it a couple times, and
Yeah.
some of these people might not know.
So it happens a lot in lakes that don't have as much current or not hardly any natural current at all. It doesn't happen as much on Tennessee River lakes. It can to a degree if you have a long period of time where we don't have rain, like that drought that we had in 2016. There were so many fish in the grass. Everybody's like, man, they're in the grass. The grass is great this year. Well, the reason they're in the grass is because that's the only place they can be.
Right.
Like they could be like 14 foot or shallower because of the way the thermocline was because they couldn't run any current.
Yeah.
So it
Now,
was basically like a normal lake.
right? How can you tell where the thermocline is on a depth finder?
Yeah, so the easiest way to do that, I found, like you can see it on like downscan, but the easiest way to see it is to crank up the gain on your 2D sonar, your traditional 2D sonar, and what you'll see this really like interference, cloudy area, and it'll be one depth range in the lake. So say it gets down, you're over 40 foot of water, but everything below 25 is hazy. That's your thermocline. What that is down there is dead water. That is water that doesn't have very rich oxygen content, and the only thing that you're really going to see down there is, fish that can handle that. So there'll actually be catfish that will be down there. There'll be gar that will be down there at that depth to a degree, but they're still, guess where they're going to feed?
They're gonna
They got to come up to feed. That's where the bait is, right? So your predatory fish, when they actually are feeding, are going to be above that thermocline area. The bass, they seem to really struggle to live below that point. They need the higher oxygen content. Striper or any kind of striped bass need a lot more, so they're way up, getting away from that stuff. So, but that's the easiest way. Crank up the gain on the 2D. Look for interference down there. And another thing, I'll tell you kind of a sneaky trick. So I called this the other day absolutely perfectly. I was out talking to Tanner. We had both started fishing a ledge one day, and it just sucked. There was literally so many fish there, but he didn't get a single fish to bite. And I was like, I'm going to go catch him right now. Boom, go over there. I can't catch him on a shad. I'm like, I called Tanner up. I'm like, dude, like the last 4 foot of the bottom right there, all the way to the bottom up on that ledge is hazy. I was like, there's going to be a big mayfly hatch tomorrow. Next day, huge mayfly hatch. They were gorging themselves on nymphs.
Yeah.
And you can actually see before you have a big hatch, especially out deep and on channel swing areas, you'll see this like interference right off the bottom. There's literally billions of these little nymphs that are going to end up coming up. A percentage of them are going to actually hatch and become mayflies. So there's twice as many down there as there was that actually hatch, right?
Right.
And the fish gorge on them right before the hatch happens. Then they go shallow and they gorge on them there. So it actually feeds the deep fish and the shallow fish in the lake, but it can leave you with your head scratching because you cracked them the day before, and you get out on these ledges, you're like, what happened?
Yeah, and they just feel it.
They're there. They're set up perfect. They're right on the bottom. They should be eating the football jig every cast. No, They're right on the bottom because they're just sitting there just vacuuming up nymphs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it
So
was so funny though. I figured that out a few years ago, and I was like, okay, I understand now why this is not
yeah.
working.
So hey, Norman, let's let's ask our final question that we ask everybody that comes on here.
All right,
You want
man.
to take it away?
I will take this one away. Caleb,
Yo,
if you were to have one person, this person could be passed away or still living, doesn't need to be involved with fishing, but one person, if you could have on your boat for the day, who would that person be and
golly,
why?
that's a tough one. All right, so I got it'll be one of two. Either one of them will work, right? Either Mark Zona, just
Good
because he's
answer.
a Banff man.
That's
He's
awesome.
just cool. We could listen to Metallica and rip some lips.
Oh, there
Like,
you
we're
go.
just gonna have a good time. All right, and then the other one's gonna be Richard Gene, the fishing machine.
Oh man.
Just because I want to learn how to catch blue-footed snail darters in the back of a creek on the top of a mountain, just because he knows how to catch any fish at any time. He's like, I got a spot for that. We would just go catch some random fish that he knows how to catch.
yeah. And
Blue
uh,
streak snail darters, the back of Alabama Creek somewhere. But yeah, it'd be Richard Gene or Mark Zona.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome,
and
dude.
that's two people that would definitely Zona would be a hoot to have on the boat anyways.
Oh,
Just
Richard would too. Both of them boys would just be fun.
yeah, but I think there'd just be a lot more BS going around if Zona was in the
Yeah,
boat than if there'd be a lot more learning going on with old Richard.
I don't know. I'd get fired up with him too. It might just be shenanigans either way. I mean,
Right?
there might not be even all that much really good fishing involved, but we'd have a dang good time for sure.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
you
yeah. So well, yeah, guys, we're gonna get off here. We've had Caleb on here for an hour and 22 minutes, and and when I was talking to him when he was getting off the water, he's like, "Man, how long is this gonna be?" He says, "I haven't eaten. I haven't done nothing." Well, he's eating.
I had my
So,
Southwest omelet. Now I'm champing.
but I told him I said we typically go about an hour, but we've got him about 22, 23 minutes longer than what I had told him, and
go. Again, what do
so
we always say? When you start talking fishing, start doing what we love,
I
talking about
know
what we love, time just flies, dude.
it
yeah,
really
Kelly, it's been
does. I mean, you
fun, man.
start
A
getting
lot of
into it.
great conversation. A lot. I mean, uh, I guarantee our viewers tonight has picked up a lot of good info. I know I have myself, and but man, that is some really spot on stuff. We really appreciate it. Before we get off here, though, Colin, let's tell everybody about next week. Sunday. What are we doing Sunday, Colin? And let
all right.
everybody know
Well,
what we got next Sunday.
Sunday, Norman and I are heading to Orlando
Oh,
because
I cast.
we got iCast, and we're going to be working at some of the booths for our sponsors. We're going to be spending a couple hours at each booth. Um, and so, if you're going to be at iCast, make sure you come by, chit chat with us. And we love chit chatting, talking about fishing. We almost got Caleb to come down, but then he hollered at me and said, "Man, I can. My schedule is so packed.
Yeah,
I can't get
slammed.
off." But because we
I
were
was
wanting
probably
to
gonna
get
catch
him
for like
down
4 months
there.
of not working.
Yeah, we were wanting to get him down in the Everglades and catch some peacocks with him.
Oh yeah,
But
We'll make that happen one day, Caleb. We'll get down there with you and stroke some of the Florida bass down there with you one day.
that's what I'm
yeah,
talking about. I
so
love catching these.
so next week's podcast, we're going to take a little break because we're actually at this time we're going to be on either what Lake Placid or June
Uh, yeah.
with Dennis
Dennis,
Crenshaw
Dennis
catching
Crenshaw,
some
uh,
monster crappie. So
Lake Placid, Florida. Lake Placid freshwater
Florida guys.
chartering guide.
Yeah.
We'll be at ICAST through Thursday. Then we head back to Lake Placid Thursday afternoon, and we will be doing a filming deal with Dennis, doing some night crappie fishing down there. And then next day, Friday, we are heading to the Glades, and we're gonna
Getting
try to
fish
bat
there
some
for the night.
peacocks on the head, dude.
Yeah. So Jerry said that Hunter and I will be drifting around ICAST. So, Jerry, make sure you come by. If you see us
Yeah.
around, do not hesitate to come and chit chat with us.
Yeah.
We
All
love
right.
it. But again, Caleb, we deeply appreciate you coming
Yeah,
on here,
man.
man. And I enjoy every time I get to talk to you, every time I get to get out on the boat and water with you. I learn so much with you, and I've learned so much through your videos. Um, and that's how I got to know Caleb. I just sent him a message saying, "Hey, you want to go fishing sometime?"
I was like, yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah." And so we went out, and then we've gone fishing quite a few times after that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
We're about to do another trip. We need to get out there and mess around.
yeah, we do, and I'm ready to catch a 10 pound bass this time.
Yeah. You have to wait till the winter time to do that probably. We've
Yeah,
only had I say we've only had like 2 10 pounders in the last like 4 or 5 weeks.
yeah,
Well, hopefully we play our cards right. You
A
hold
bunch of
your
those
tongue on the
little
right side of the mouth,
dinky
Colin. Maybe we
nine.
can make that happen in Florida.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to try to do that in Florida. But hey, Caleb, real quick before we end this, can you tell everybody again how they can get in contact with you?
Absolutely.
And your
So
YouTube channel as well.
yeah, Bassquest is the YouTube channel, all one word.
Make
And
sure
then
to subscribe.
BassquestFishingCharters.com. That's how you can book a trip easy. It'll book it on both our calendars. You can choose what kind of trip that you want and go on from there. And then, of course, follow me on my social. I'm more active on Facebook and Instagram now than I am my YouTube channel. I need to post some more content. I've got so much footage backlogged and stuff. It's just hard for me to find a free few hours to edit and get it out. So keep pestering me on that. I'll get some
Yeah.
YouTube videos out there too.
Now, if somebody wants to have like a one-on-one, uh, like trip with you, can you? And they just want you to teach them like what you done today with on the map, just to see
Yeah,
it on the screen.
that's actually an option. Thanks for mentioning that. That's actually an option on the site. You can schedule a map study, like a 2 hour map study with me. Pick whatever lake that you want, your local lake, and we'll go over contours if they have contours on it. If they don't, we'll go over Google Earth images, and we'll break it down, and I'll let you know what I would do in that situation. So
Yeah,
it's helped out a lot of people so far. I know some people have done really good in some kayak tournaments lately.
right. So, guys, I mean, it is a wide variety of what Caleb does, and it's phenomenal. It is a fun trip, no matter what you do. But and you're going to learn. He's always talking about what's going on. So you
Yeah,
just got to open your ears, listen to what he's saying, and take it in, and then you can get out yourself and be able to put that into system and
right.
learn. Um, but again, we want everybody to go to his website. Uh, Book a trip with him. I'd like to be able to call him up and he says, "Man, I'm already booked up for another 6 months." So let's
Yeah,
get
heck yeah.
everybody. We got right now. We got 1,300 people that's watching. So
That's watching
uh,
live.
that's live. That's watching.
Dang.
So if I mean 1,300 goes and
Yeah,
books up with you, I mean
that'll
that's
be a
already
lot
like
of dang trips right there. Jeez.
so, but guys, yeah, if you're ever around the Chattanooga area, and what lakes do you go and fish? Is it mainly just Chickamauga?
Mostly Chickamauga and Nickajack. Everybody seems lately to want to go to Chickamauga just because that is your best chance at a trophy fish. Um, however, there's tons of giant fish on Nickajack Lake,
Yeah,
and there's a couple other lakes around here that I'm considering doing some guiding on. So I've kind of got some hush stuff that I might be able to pop down and guide on a little bit. So, but yeah, there's options around here, but most people tend to want to go to Chickamauga just because it's close to Chattanooga. For one, they can
yeah,
kind of do the good food thing, great places to stay. Talking Tackle is an awesome place to stay. By the way, I've had several of my clients stay over at Talking Tackle, and then you can sit there and peruse and spend way too much money on tackle, and then drink coffee and take a nap there, and then go fishing. So,
yeah.
works
So,
out good.
real quick, Chase Broyle said, "Did you get your boat back, or do you got out of clients' rigs?"
Yep. So I have my boat was totaled, unfortunately, but I actually have sitting out front here. I have Gene Jensen's boat. So
Yep, the Fluke Master.
yeah, I got his
Everybody might
Alumacraft. So
know
that's
as
what I'm
Fluke.
guiding out of right now.
Yep. So there's your answer, Chase, and we're going to get off of here. And again, Caleb, brother, man, we deeply appreciate you coming on here. I know
Absolutely.
that. I mean, if somebody did not learn anything from it, I mean,
Then
Just
they need
want
to
to
teach me.
right,
Tell them I need a call. I want to. If
right.
they know all that plus more, I'm down.
Yep,
Go
yep.
get coffee before.
So
and
guys, we appreciate it,
the one
and
thing about anglers is never forget, no matter how young of an angler you are, no matter how old you are, no matter how much you know, always listen, always keep your ears open to
Yeah,
when somebody like Caleb is talking, because you can never know enough. You're always going to be learning. I don't care how much you think you know. There's always more you
yeah.
can pick up.
And it could be, that's the thing. Don't ever be too proud to not to listen to somebody. And it could be a
Exactly.
lot of things. I don't care if it's a crappie fisherman or a cat
yeah,
fisherman. When you start talking to people about anything going on within your fishery, I don't care what it is. What you'll a lot of times do is you'll start to draw parallels, and you'll
yeah,
learn something that you didn't know before. I mean, I've learned a lot of stuff from bow fishermen, that tell me, okay, I saw this. Well, heck, I was out shooting carp the other night, and I saw a bunch of like 8 pound bass sitting over here in 8 inches of water, and I'm like, man, I did not expect fish to be in that area, that shallow right now.
yeah,
So they're constantly surprising me. Like, and the more time that I spend on the water, the more I realize like what I think I know, I don't know 100%. They're
right,
always changing the game on you. So keep your ear to the ground, and always keep your eyes up, peeled, and you just learn from anything that you see out there. It could be the birds, it could be the bait, whatever it is. Try to take as much in sensory wise as you possibly can, and you'll start to really take off. But I'll tell you, probably the biggest thing that's helped me along the years is just fishing with people that are way dang better at fishing than I am. I'm
yeah.
always still trying to take people out like that.
So guys, that is the last fact that we're going to get from Caleb tonight because I'm not going I'm not going to hold him up
Yeah,
because we want him
about
to
my
come back.
bedtime now.
And yeah, we because we're going to have Caleb on. We're going to try to get him on during right as the fall transition, so
Oh
he
yeah,
can do another lake map study with us to kind of show what he's looking at and how to for us to be able to figure out what's the
absolutely.
best. So, Caleb, we really appreciate you coming on, guys. Remember, go to his YouTube, go to his website, book a trip. I mean, I guarantee you're gonna have the best time of your life out there on the boat with him. So,
Hopefully so.
well,
I'm
I
trying
mean,
to deliver
just
on
being
that.
out there with you. I mean, it's. Um, but guys, we will see you here in 2 weeks because we're going to be at ICAST, and we have uh, we have Ryan Gotsey coming on
Hey,
um, after that, and then the following week we got the Tennessee State champion in high school coming on. He's actually going to be in studio with us.
heck yeah.
Uh, so, but yeah, we're gonna knock go on. I've been up since about 2 o'clock this morning. So,
Golly. So I thought I was
um,
up early. Jeez.
so,
Your
but
bedtime too.
yeah, it's past my bedtime, brother. But
Tight lines. Hope to see everybody on the water. Live the passion.
yeah,
Peace out, bros.
I